Okay. So we're back in order to continue with our presentation. In the next section we'll discuss another important aspect of international trade and international sales concerning the international terms of payment. So, among the characteristics of the international payment, we shall include the distance and timescale inherent in international trade, present a number of problems with international businesses. Okay. The two factors reinforce the conflict which exists between the buyer and the seller. On the one hand, the buyer will be concerned to make sure that his agreement with the seller ensures the correct delivery of the goods ordered at the right place, at the right time, and and with as little adverse effect on his cash flow as possible. On the other hand, the seller will want to make payment secure and have as small a gap as possible between producing and transporting the goods and receiving payment. He will too be concerned with the maintenance of his cash flow. The concerns of the buyer and the seller will have implication for those involved in the transport chain, because the method and the timing of payment may well be dependent on the correct preparation and presentation of documents, adherence to shipment and delivery dates, and any restriction on part of or transshipment of a consignment. Some other characteristics of international payment include the absence of credit information, as it's much harder to find credit information on a person which is in a foreign country, a lack of personal contact due to the different physical location. Communication is typically not done face-to-face. This can make it hard to get to know a person, which is particularly important in certain cultures. The collections are difficult and expensive, so if a customer fails to pay, it is difficult and expensive to collect on the past due account. No easy legal resource. Due to the nature of international transactions, there is no single court that has direct jurisprudence over an international trade dispute between an exporter and an importer. While finally, there are higher litigation costs if legal proceedings are required. There are much more expensive and complicated than for a domestic case. Aggregating all the above, a climate of mistrust is often created. So, moving to the methods of payment. The method of payment in an international sale is really a matter of negotiation between the buyer and the seller, and will be related to the mutual trust that exists. It must be remembered that unless cash is handed over directly from the buyer to seller without any kind of paperwork, every other method of payment involves some form of cost. There are a whole range of methods of payment, some of which provide varying degrees of security and advantage for both buyer and seller. So we'll continue. In this graph, we see the methods of payment, the traditional methods of payments, among which we distinguish cash with order or advance payments, open accounts, and letter of credit. So, moving to the first, cash with order payment. This is the most advantageous method of payment for the seller, as is cash in order, a form of payment in advance. In such an occasion, the exporter requests that the customer provide payment in advance before shipment of goods can take place. This method is totally risk-free to the exporter, as he has no collection worries, no foreign exchange fluctuation exposure, no cash flow problems, while also he has only nominal fees to pay to the banks. It is not, however, as much beneficial to the buyer, because he would in effect extend credit to the seller and would have little redress against delay in transport or in case of incomplete carrying out of the contract. Despite this fact, it is not unusual for the buyer to have to pay some form of deposit upon the signing of the sales contract. According to this method of payment, this method of payment is only recommended for doing business in very few countries, those in which fraud is rampant, where there is political instability, where the currency is non-convertible, or where there is possibility of foreign exchange freezes. It is not recommended in general for business conducted in developed countries and in countries in which there is some level of sophistication in international business. The next method of payment is through an open account. The open account type of payment is the most favorable form of payment for the buyer. The goods are ordered, the exporter dispatches the goods and sends the documents directly to the buyer, and seller awaits payment by some previously agreed manner. Often payment terms may be monthly or even longer. This method presents many risks for the exporter, as this method should be used with well-established customers or with customers the exporter expects to have a long-term relationship. The customer credit should be checked before this method is used. It is possible, however, to sell internationally on an open account basis and still take little risk by transferring the risk of non-payment to an insurance company. Insurance companies sell credit insurance, a policy that will cover non-payment by the importer. This type of method was subsidized by some European countries in the 1980s, and exporters from the European Union frequently use credit insurance when selling on an open account. Finally, moving to the third and last type of payment, this is the letter of credit. This method of payment is frequently found in international trade and is a very good compromise between the need of both the seller and the buyer. It is a fairly flexible form of payment, as it gives security to both parties and is one of the safest methods of payment. A letter of credit is a document in which the importer's bank essentially promises to pay the exporter if the importer does not pay. The creditworthiness of the bank is substituted for that of the importer, and the exporter is protected. Letters of credit are not paid until the exporter supplies the importer with a specified set of documents agreed in advance. The importer, in this case, therefore, is also protected. There are frequently used cases in which the exporter has no pre-existing business relationship. Κάποιο μικρόφωνο ακούγεται. They are frequently used cases in which the exporter, So, There are frequently used cases in which the exporter has no pre-existing business relationship with the importer, or when the importer is located in a country that is considered to be risky. Letters of credit are also called documentary credit, since it is important to realize that letters of credit are documentary, meaning that the bank is only obliged to pay upon presentation of certain documents by the importer. In order to issue a letter of credit, parties required to engage in 4 steps. The exporter and the importer agree to conduct business on a letter of credit basis. The exporter sends a pro forma invoice to the importer. The importer asks his bank, called the issuing bank, to provide him a letter of credit, naming the exporter as the beneficiary. The importer's bank then sends the letter of credit to the exporter's bank, called the advising bank. And finally, the exporter's bank reviews and sometimes advises the letter of credit, making sure that it is conform to the terms to which the exporter agreed. There are therefore 4 parties who are involved in a documentary credit: the importer, the applicant of the credit, the exporter, or else the beneficiary, the importer's bank issuing the aforementioned or else the issuing bank, and finally the exporter's bank, the advising or payment bank. In this graph we see the flow of the connections among the interconnected parties in this transaction, and how they coordinate all together in order to perform and execute the international trade and sell, and conclude the sale between the exporter and the importer. Moreover, we're going to discuss some important transport documents utilized in international trade. Documents of title in transport. Transport documents can be described as the receipt evidence issued by carriers to the exporters, which acts as documents of necessity for cargo delivery, complaints, as well as settlement or negotiation to banks. According to different modes of transportation, shipping documents mainly refer to marine bill of lading, seaway bills, and multimodal transport documents. This chapter will mainly illustrate the maritime bill of lading and the invoice document. The maritime bill of lading or ocean bill of lading, abbreviated as bill of lading or BL, is a document which evidences a contract of carriage by sea and the taking over or loading on board of the goods by the carrier, while also by which the carrier undertakes to release the goods against surrendering of the document. Moving to the functions of a bill of lading. In accordance with the definition of a marine bill of lading, its functions are mentioned below. A bill of lading is evidence of the contract of carriage between the consignor and the shipping company. The rights and obligations of the 2 parties are listed on the bill of lading. Bill of lading is also a receipt for the goods issued by the ship owner or his agent, evidencing the receipt of the goods mentioned in the bill of lading. Finally, a bill of lading is a document of title to the goods. Any lawful holder of a bill of lading may take the delivery of the goods from the shipping company against the bill of lading, or transfer the title to the goods by transferring the bill of lading, or secure loans against the bill of lading from the bank before the arrival of the shipment. With regard to the parties involved in a maritime bill of lading, the parties included are the carriers, the shippers, the consignees, the notified party, the transferee, and the bearer. The carrier refers to the persons who signed the shipment contract with the shipper as a shipping company or a charterer without a shipping vessel. Shipper is the party who reaches the shipment contract with the carrier. Shippers could be the consignor or the consignee in accordance with the trade terms. The consignee may be the buyer, the bearer, or the specialized person written in the named bill of lading. Importers are often the consignees in these cases. The notified party is the person who is informed by the shipping company at the arrival of the goods at the port. The notified party could be the importer or its agent. The transferee is the receiver of the bill of lading after the endorsement or transfer and could claim the shipment from the carrier. Finally, the bearer is defined as the legal holder of the bill of lading. The holder could be the consignee or the assignee. Now, discussing whether we have a clean or unclean bill of lading. According to whether there are notes on the bill of lading, it will fall into two categories: a clean bill of lading and an unclean bill of lading. With regard to the first, a clean bill of lading shows that goods have been shipped on board a vessel in apparent good order or condition. A clean bill of lading is issued to the shipper when the goods do not have any exterior defects at the port of shipment. Actually, on every bill of lading there are words "shipped in apparent good order and condition." The carrier will not modify this statement if the goods are in good order, therefore making the bill of lading clean. The carrier undertakes full liability for the goods and will carry and deliver them in the same good order as he received them. Finally, the carrier will be liable if the goods are found damaged. A bill of lading in the other occasion will not be clean if it contained any endorsement relating to the condition of the cargo, and such an endorsement may result in payment being refused or delayed by the bank. Finally, we have the invoices and some other documents utilized in international sales and international transportation, which is to begin with the invoice, which is evidence of contract that exists between the buyer and the seller. The invoice must specify clearly the quality and quantity of the goods transported, together with the unit and the total price. In addition to the invoice, the buyer may demand other documents such as a certificate of origin, a phytosanitary certificate, a certificate of analysis, and other types of independent inspections. It is on these documents that the buyer relies to provide evidence that the goods covered by the invoice are indeed what he expects them to be, as he will part his money at the same moment as the documents are released to him. And this brings us to our final chapter, which is the conclusions. So, international trade is a dynamic business, and its customs and practices change with the advent of new modes of transport, improved communications, changes in demand and supply, banking arrangements, national and international laws, as well as many other factors. Incoterms are designed to cover a wide variety of terms. These terms are not merely inventions of the International Chamber of Commerce, but reflect the terms on which international traders prefer to do business. The terms on which parties do business evolve to suit the changing times. The International Chamber of Commerce regularly reviews and revises Incoterms in accordance with the preferences of trade and changes in practice. Many recent amendments in Incoterms have been undertaken to facilitate the increased use and efficiency of electronic interchange, as well as the minimization of errors occurring because of the current manual processes. Finally, parties involved in international trade are required to decide on the most appropriate term to be used according to the type of goods, the forms of transfer to be used, as well as the method of payment to be used. And at this point, we reach the end of this session. Thank you very much for your attention. The next session will begin at 3 o'clock. Thank you very much.
Θα τον συστήνω, ναι.